In 1953, a woman named Dorothy Hargrove put a pork roast in the oven at 7:45 in the morning before she put on her good dress and walked her 4 children 3 blocks to First Baptist Church in Muncie, Indiana. The roast cost 61 cents. By the time the congregation finished singing the 3rd hymn, the whole street could smell it. Dorothy did not use a timer. She did not need one. She had made that roast every Sunday for 11 years, and her hands knew exactly how long it took. Her family called Sunday supper the best hour of the week, not because of the food alone, because of what the food meant. That hour is gone now. The table is gone. The roast is gone. And most of the women who knew how to make it are gone too. But the meals they cooked on Sunday afternoons across this country, after church, before the week started over again, were some of the most carefully made, deeply felt, and completely forgotten dishes in American history. Number 18 on this list was so tied to Sunday in the American South that a 1957 survey of 600 women in Georgia found that 91% of them served it every single week without variation. Number 7 was the dessert that appeared on more church-going tables than any other in the entire decade, and fewer than 1 in 100 people under 50 have ever tasted it. And number 1, the Sunday supper that mothers across the Midwest made for 40 consecutive years without ever writing down the recipe, has been so completely erased from the American table that most food historians do not even list it. These were not fancy meals. They were not restaurant meals. They were the meals that made Sunday mean something. These 25 Sunday suppers were not made in cooking schools. They were not made from magazine recipes. They were made in kitchens that smelled like bacon grease and dish soap and good perfume by women who had been on their feet since before sunrise and would stay on their feet until every last dish was done. If you grew up sitting at a Sunday table, this list belongs to you. Hit that subscribe button right now and ring the bell, because every week on this channel we bring back one more piece of the table that America forgot, and you do not want to miss a single one. Number 25, pot roast with root vegetables. Before the slow cooker existed, there was Sunday morning and a cast iron Dutch oven and a piece of chuck roast that cost less than $1. Mothers across the Midwest seasoned it with salt, pepper, and garlic powder, browned it in bacon grease on the stovetop, then buried it under quartered potatoes, halved carrots, and whole onions before sliding it into a 250-degree oven at 8 in the morning. 8 hours later, when the family walked back through the door, the meat had given up every ounce of resistance it had and collapsed into something that required no knife. The vegetables had absorbed the fat and the collagen and turned translucent and sweet. The whole thing cost under $2 and fed 6 people with enough left over for Monday. No recipe card needed. The hands remembered. The oven remembered. The smell coming through the front door said everything the family needed to know about what Sunday meant. Number 24, baked ham with brown sugar and cloves. A whole ham was the Sunday meal that announced something: a birthday, a homecoming, a holiday, or simply the fact that the week had been good enough to deserve it. Mothers scored the fat in diamonds with a sharp knife, pressed a whole clove into each intersection, and painted the entire surface with a paste of brown sugar, dry mustard, and just enough apple cider vinegar to make it run. Into the oven for 3 hours, every 45 minutes, a basting with the pan drippings that had turned into a dark, sweet, savory lacquer. The smell that came out of that oven was the smell of celebration in a one-income household. Children who grew up eating Sunday ham at a proper table remember the sound of the knife against the platter, the way the meat released from the bone in thick slices, the sweetness of the glaze against the salt of the pork. A whole ham cost under $3 in 1954. It was the most luxurious, affordable thing a working family could put on a Sunday table, and almost nobody makes it that way anymore. Number 23, chicken and dumplings. In the rural South and across Appalachia, chicken and dumplings was the Sunday supper that turned one old laying hen into a meal for 8. You stewed the chicken low and slow all morning until the meat fell from the bones in long, tender shreds. Then you mixed flour, baking powder, salt, and enough whole milk to bring it to a soft dough. You dropped it by the spoonful directly into the simmering broth, covered the pot, and did not lift the lid for 20 minutes. Those dumplings swelled into pale, pillowy mounds that had absorbed the flavor of the chicken and the fat and the bay leaf, and the 3 hours of patience that went into the pot before them. Every family had a different ratio. Every grandmother had a different secret. Some added an egg. Some used lard instead of butter. Some put a pinch of sugar. None of them wrote it down. The recipe lived in the wrist. It died with the woman who owned the wrist. Number 22, deviled eggs. No Sunday table in the 1950s was complete without the deviled egg plate. It was the dish that appeared before the meal, sitting at the center of the table while the roast finished its last half hour in the oven. Hard-boiled eggs split cleanly in half, the yolks mashed with mayonnaise, yellow mustard, a splash of pickle juice, salt, and white pepper, then piped or spooned back into the whites with a practiced hand and dusted with a careful shake of paprika. It cost almost nothing. A dozen eggs was 23 cents in 1952. But the deviled egg plate was not about the cost. It was about the presentation, about the fact that a woman had taken the time to make something precise and beautiful and arrange it on the good china before her family sat down. It told everyone at the table that Sunday was worth the effort, that they were worth the effort. Number 21, green bean casserole with cream of mushroom soup. Campbell's Soup Company introduced the recipe in 1955, and within 3 years it had appeared on Sunday tables from Maine to California. A can of cream of mushroom soup, a splash of milk, a dash of soy sauce, 2 cans of drained green beans, and a handful of fried onions on top. Into the oven for 30 minutes. It was not sophisticated. It was not original. But it was reliable. It was warm. And it tasted like something a mother made, even when the mother had been at church all morning and had 12 other things on the stove. The fried onion topping crunched against the creamy beans in a way that felt deeply satisfying to every child who ever dragged a fork through the casserole dish looking for more. Food historians have called it the most successful single recipe ever published in America. It sold soup, but it also fed a generation of families who needed something hot and good on the table by noon. And it delivered. Number 20, macaroni and cheese from scratch, not the blue box, the real thing. Elbow macaroni boiled until just tender, drained and tossed with a bechamel built from butter, flour, whole milk, and enough sharp cheddar to turn the sauce the color of October sunlight. Poured into a buttered baking dish, topped with more shredded cheese and a thick scattering of buttered breadcrumbs, then baked until the top had set into a crust that shattered under the spoon and gave way to the molten layer beneath. This was the macaroni and cheese that children asked for by name on their birthdays, that grandmothers made without measuring, that appears in church cookbooks from the 1950s, with head notes that say things like, "Everybody loves this one," without a single instruction for how long to bake it, because the woman who wrote it down already knew, and she assumed you did too. Number 19, creamed corn made from scratch. In August, when the sweet corn came in heavy from the garden or the roadside stand, mothers across the Midwest and South made creamed corn the way it was meant to be made. They shucked the ears over the kitchen sink, stood each one upright on a cutting board, and ran a sharp knife down the cob in long strips, then scraped the back of the blade against the cob to release the milk. That starchy liquid was the whole secret. Into a cast iron skillet with butter, a little sugar, salt, and just enough heavy cream to make it loose. Low heat, a wooden spoon, 20 minutes of patience. What came out was nothing like the gray sweet paste in a can. It was golden and savory and sweet, in the way only fresh corn can be sweet, concentrated by heat into something that tasted like summer, had been cooked down to its essential truth. Number 18, fried chicken. A 1957 survey of 600 women in Georgia found that 91% of them served fried chicken every single Sunday without variation, not because they had to, because their families would have noticed if they did not. The chicken soaked overnight in buttermilk seasoned with hot sauce and black pepper. In the morning before church, it was dredged in seasoned flour, sometimes twice, shaken off, and set on a rack to dry while the cast iron skillet heated a full inch of lard to 350 degrees. Each piece went in skin side down and was not touched for 7 minutes. The sound it made was the sound of Sunday. The crust that formed was shattering and dark gold and salted perfectly. Eaten warm from the pan or cold from the icebox the next day at school, Southern fried chicken was the most democratic meal in America. Rich families made it. Poor families made it. And every single one of them believed their grandmother's version was the best one. Number 17, buttermilk biscuits. Southern biscuits were not baked from a recipe. They were made from muscle memory, from the knowledge of how the dough should feel under the hands before it went into the oven. 2 cups of self-rising flour, cold lard cut in with the fingertips until the mixture looked like coarse sand. Enough cold buttermilk poured in a well at the center to bring the dough together without overworking it. Turned out, patted flat, cut with the rim of a water glass, and pressed onto a dark baking sheet with the sides touching, so they pushed each other upward as they rose. 12 minutes at 450 degrees. The biscuits that came out were tall and flaky and golden on top, and pale on the sides where they had leaned against each other. They required butter. They required honey or sorghum or the drippings from the roast. And they required a grandmother who had made them so many times that her hands knew things her mind had long since forgotten how to explain. Number 16, glazed carrots. Carrots boiled until just tender, then finished in a skillet with butter, brown sugar, and a pinch of salt, until the liquid reduced to a sticky amber glaze that clung to every surface. They cost almost nothing. They took 12 minutes from start to finish, and they turned up on Sunday tables across America for 3 consecutive decades without anyone thinking of them as anything remarkable. They were just the carrots, the sweet side dish that children tolerated and adults forgot to appreciate until they were grown. And the Sunday table was gone, and they found themselves trying to remember exactly what made them taste like that. The answer was the brown butter, and the patience to let the glaze reduce all the way, and the fact that someone made them for you on a Sunday afternoon when you were small, and the world outside the kitchen window was still manageable. Number 15, tomato aspic. By 1950, every church cookbook in the South had at least 2 tomato aspic recipes, and every woman who brought one to a potluck knew she would go home with an empty dish. Tomato juice heated with unflavored gelatin, seasoned with Worcestershire, celery seed, onion juice, and a generous pinch of salt, then poured into a ring mold or individual cups and set overnight in the refrigerator. Unmolded onto a bed of iceberg lettuce and topped with a spoonful of mayonnaise. It was savory and cold and jiggly and deeply unfashionable by the time the 1980s arrived. Food writers mocked it. Comedians used it as a punchline. And in doing so, they erased one of the most genuinely delicious cold dishes that the American South ever produced. The women who made it were not naive. They knew exactly what they were doing. What they were doing was feeding people something good. Number 14, scalloped potatoes. Thinly sliced raw potatoes layered in a buttered baking dish with sliced onion, a dusting of flour, salt, pepper, and enough whole milk or thin cream to come halfway up the sides. Covered with foil for the first 40 minutes, then uncovered for the final 20, until the top had browned and the milk had reduced into a thick, starchy sauce that held the layers together like mortar. Scalloped potatoes required almost nothing. 4 medium potatoes, 1 onion, a cup of milk, a tablespoon of butter. The total cost in 1952 was 11 cents. But they came out of the oven looking and tasting like something that required effort and skill. Because they did. The slicing had to be thin and even. The layering mattered. The patience mattered. They appeared on Sunday tables alongside whatever roast or ham was in the oven, and they disappeared from the dish before anything else did. Number 13, banana pudding with vanilla wafers. The real banana pudding was not made from a box. It was made from scratch custard, cooked on the stovetop in a double boiler until it was thick and smooth and pale yellow and smelled like vanilla and warm cream. Layered in a glass dish with vanilla wafers and sliced ripe bananas, covered in plastic wrap, and left in the refrigerator for 4 hours until the wafers had softened into something between a cake layer and a custard component, and the bananas had turned the cream faintly sweet at the edges, topped with real meringue browned under the broiler, or with whipped cream folded by hand. This was the dessert that children asked for on their birthdays instead of cake, that grandmothers made for every church dinner without being asked. It was humble and generous and entirely, irreducibly good. And the version that most people know today, made from instant pudding and whipped topping, is a photograph of the original taken in low light. If this is bringing back memories of your own Sunday table, hit that subscribe button right now. Every week we go deeper into the kitchen that America forgot. You do not want to miss what is coming next. Number 12, stuffed bell peppers. 6 bell peppers, tops cut off, seeds scooped out, blanched for 4 minutes in boiling salted water until just softened, filled with a mixture of browned ground beef, cooked rice, diced onion, a can of diced tomatoes, Worcestershire sauce, and enough salt and pepper to make the filling taste like something rather than nothing. Topped with a spoonful of ketchup and a lid of shredded cheddar. Baked at 350 degrees for 35 minutes until the cheese had browned at the edges and the peppers had collapsed into themselves with a kind of dignified surrender. Stuffed bell peppers appeared on the Sunday tables of working families because they stretched a half-pound of ground beef into a meal for 6. They have almost entirely disappeared from American home kitchens, not because they stopped being good, because the generation that knew how to make them is leaving us, one Sunday at a time. Number 11, cornbread dressing, not stuffing, dressing. The difference matters in the South. Dressing was made with crumbled day-old cornbread, not store-bought bread cubes. It was moistened with homemade chicken broth, seasoned with sage and thyme and black pepper, mixed with sautéed onion and celery, and baked in a separate pan until the top was golden and the inside was somewhere between a pudding and a bread. Southern grandmothers made it year-round, not just at Thanksgiving, because a good roast chicken or Sunday ham demanded it the way a frame demands a painting. The version that lives in church cookbooks from the 1950s calls for a full stick of butter, a cup and a half of broth, and the cook's judgment on everything else. The cook's judgment, that is the ingredient that cannot be written down. That is the ingredient we have lost. Number 10, icebox rolls. Icebox rolls were the Sunday bread that a woman started on Saturday night. A soft yeast dough made from flour, sugar, shortening, and egg, warm water, and a packet of active dry yeast mixed together, covered with a damp cloth, and set in the refrigerator overnight where it rose slowly and developed a flavor that no same-day roll has ever matched. On Sunday morning before church, she pulled off pieces of dough, shaped them into smooth balls, placed them touching in a buttered pan, and left them on the counter to come to temperature and puff while the family was at service. By the time the roast came out of the oven, the rolls went in for 15 minutes. They came out burnished and tender and soft all the way to the center, with a faint sweetness that made them eat like something between a dinner roll and a celebration. They required planning. They required Saturday. That is why nobody makes them anymore. Number 9, sweet potato pie. Sweet potato pie has been made in American Southern kitchens since before this country had a name, and it was served at more church-going Sunday tables in the 1950s than any other dessert except banana pudding. Boiled sweet potatoes mashed smooth with butter, sugar, evaporated milk, eggs, cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla, poured into a homemade crust and baked until the filling had set with a faint tremor at the center. It was earthy and custardy and deeply sweet in a way that felt satisfying rather than cloying. It was humble food that tasted like a gift. The women who made it did not think of it as a recipe. They thought of it as Sunday, as the particular smell of the kitchen in late October when the sweet potatoes were coming in, and the oven was on, and the week was almost over, and the family was almost home. Number 8, pimento cheese sandwiches. Before the main meal was ready, before the roast came out of the oven and the biscuits went in, there were pimento cheese sandwiches on a plate on the kitchen counter for anyone who wandered through hungry. Sharp cheddar grated by hand, not shredded from a bag, mixed with mayonnaise, drained pimentos from a jar, a pinch of sugar, black pepper, and cayenne, spread thick on soft white bread and cut corner to corner. The pimento cheese that came from a tub in a grocery store has the same name, and a completely different soul. The real version had texture from the hand-grated cheese, and a bite from the cayenne, and a sweetness from the pimentos that balanced everything. It was the food of church potlucks and back porch afternoons and Sunday kitchens across the South. They called it the pâté of the South. They were not wrong. Number 7, Jell-O mold with fruit cocktail. In 1956, the Jell-O company conducted a survey and found that the fruit cocktail mold was the single most commonly served dish at Sunday dinners and church potlucks across America. Cherry or orange gelatin dissolved in hot water, cooled to room temperature, then mixed with a drained can of fruit cocktail, poured into a ring mold, and set overnight in the refrigerator, unmolded onto a plate lined with iceberg lettuce, and served alongside the roast. It was cold and sweet and jiggly and entirely at home on a Midwestern table in February. The name comes from the Greek word for the food of the gods. The women who made it did not think of themselves as feeding gods. They thought of themselves as feeding their families on a Sunday afternoon. That is the same thing. It has always been the same thing. Number 6, liver and onions with pan gravy. Beef liver cost 19 cents a pound in 1954, which made it one of the most affordable proteins available to working families, and one of the most nutritionally dense foods on any table in America. Soaked in cold milk for an hour to pull out the bitterness, dredged in seasoned flour, and cooked in a cast iron skillet in butter with sliced onions that had been caramelized low and slow for 30 minutes until they were sweet and dark gold. The pan gravy was made from the drippings with a splash of beef broth and a handful of flour whisked in until smooth. This was Sunday supper in working-class households, from Akron to Amarillo. Children who hated it grew up and missed it. Not the taste exactly. The table, the particular sound of that skillet, the smell of onions browning while someone set the table in the other room. The liver was just the reason to be there. Number 5, ambrosia salad. Ambrosia was the Sunday dessert that pretended it was a salad so it could appear on the table before the main course without anyone objecting. Mandarin orange segments drained from a can, crushed pineapple pressed dry, miniature marshmallows, sweetened shredded coconut, and enough sour cream or whipped cream to bind it all together. Refrigerated overnight so the marshmallows softened slightly and the juices bled into the cream. It was served in a glass bowl so you could see the layers. It was sweet and cold and faintly tropical and entirely at home on a Midwestern table in February. The name comes from the Greek word for the food of the gods. The women who made it did not think of themselves as feeding gods. They thought of themselves as feeding their families on a Sunday afternoon. That is the same thing. It has always been the same thing. Number 4, homemade apple pie. The Sunday apple pie was not quick. The crust was made from scratch. 2 cups of flour cut with cold lard until it looked like coarse meal, brought together with ice water by the tablespoon until the dough just held. Divided in 2, wrapped in wax paper and rested in the ice box for an hour before rolling. The filling was 6 tarred apples, peeled and sliced thin, tossed with sugar, flour, cinnamon, nutmeg, and a pinch of salt, mounded high in the bottom crust, before the top went on and the edges were crimped with a fork or pinched with practiced fingers into a rope border. Baked at 425 degrees until the crust was deep gold and the filling bubbled through the vents. It took 3 hours from start to finish. The women who made it every Sunday did not consider that extraordinary. They considered it Sunday. Number 3, Sunday pot of pinto beans with ham hock. A pound of dried pinto beans soaked overnight in cold water, then drained and covered with fresh water in a heavy pot, with a smoked ham hock, a halved onion, 2 cloves of garlic, and enough black pepper to make the broth taste like it meant something. Simmered over low heat for 4 hours, with the lid cracked until the beans were completely soft, and the broth had thickened and turned the color of dark honey, and smelled like the ham and the smoke, and every Sunday that had come before it, served in deep bowls with a square of cornbread for soaking up the pot liquor. This was the Sunday meal of the rural South and Appalachia, of families for whom a ham hock and a pound of beans represented not deprivation, but abundance, warmth against the cold, enough, more than enough. The pot liquor left at the bottom of the bowl was the best part, and the women who made it knew you would agree. Number 2, chocolate cake with fudge frosting. The Sunday chocolate cake was the meal's final argument. 2 layers of dark chocolate cake made with buttermilk and Dutch cocoa, filled and frosted with a cooked fudge frosting that required a candy thermometer and a steady hand and the willingness to start over if it seized. The frosting was butter melted with cocoa and sugar, cooked to the soft ball stage, pulled from the heat and beaten with a wooden spoon until it thickened and lost its gloss, and became something between a fudge and a ganache that set firm on the outside and stayed yielding underneath. A woman who could make that frosting was respected. A woman whose frosting seized was consoled. The Sunday cake was the dessert that children remembered 40 years later, with the kind of precision they could not apply to anything else from childhood. The particular darkness of the chocolate, the faint bitterness in the frosting, the way it tasted different, better on Sunday. It tasted like being loved by someone who was very good at showing it. Number 1, Sunday chicken and rice bake. A raw chicken cut into pieces, laid skin side up in a single layer, in a buttered 9x13 baking dish, over a bed of dry, uncooked long-grain rice. 1 can of cream of mushroom soup thinned with 1.5 cans of water, seasoned with onion powder, garlic powder, salt, and paprika poured over the top, covered tightly with foil and baked at 300 degrees for 2.5 hours without lifting the lid. Not once. The steam did everything. The chicken cooked through completely. The rice absorbed every drop of liquid and every bit of fat that ran from the chicken, and every molecule of flavor from the soup and the spices. When the foil came off for the last 15 minutes, the top browned. The kitchen smelled like it had been cooking all day, because it had. A food historian at the University of Virginia spent 2 years trying to track down the origin of this recipe, and found it in over 400 different church cookbooks printed between 1948 and 1971, always attributed to a different woman, always with the same quiet note. Everybody asks for this one. Mothers across the Midwest made it for 40 consecutive years without writing down the recipe, because there was nothing to write. 1 dish, a few pantry ingredients, 3 hours of faith in an oven that never let them down. We have not produced anything better. We have only forgotten what we had. The Sunday table is one of the things we lost so gradually that most of us did not notice it was gone until the day we sat down to eat and realized there was nothing remarkable about the meal. No smell that had been building since morning. No dish that required Saturday preparation. no recipe that lived in someone's hands rather than on a screen. The women who cooked these 25 suppers did not think of themselves as doing something extraordinary. They thought of themselves as feeding their families. That is the same thing. It has always been the same thing. And the fact that we stopped doing it, that we replaced Dorothy Hargrove's 61-cent pork roast with a drive-through window and called it progress, is one of the quietest losses in American life. Tell me in the comments which one your mother made. Tell me which one your grandmother made without a recipe, the one she could make with her eyes closed, the one your family drove across 2 states to eat on a Sunday afternoon. Because these were not just recipes. They were the proof that the table meant something, that the hour after church, with the good dishes and the good smell and the whole family in the same room at the same time, was worth protecting. It was worth the 3 hours in the kitchen. It was worth the Saturday preparation. It was worth everything. If this brought back even one memory of your own Sunday table, subscribe to The Vanished Kitchen right now, because next week we are going back to the table again, and you do not want to miss what we find there. The Vanished Kitchen. Some flavors deserve to be remembered.